Teachers of Reddit, have you ever looked up past students online to see what happened to them? What are your most interesting discoveries? One of my former teachers told me a story about two former students he had. He didn't intentionally look anyone up, but he and some friends went to a strip club while they were in a bigger city for a convention. Two of the girls dancing were students who had graduated from his high school a couple of years before. It was awkward. This sounds like the start to a terrible porno. To reverse polarity here, one night I was watching To Catch a Predator with my girlfriend, now wife, and my high school biology teacher ended up being one of the guys Chris Hansen busted in the episode. Big WTF moment for me. Looked him up online and found out the extent his crimes. Turns out my 8th grade homeroom teacher and her husband would like have boys over at their house and seduce them or some crazy crap like that. She was a nice, older lady. I think most of this happened when she was the young and hot teacher years ago. One of my students is in prison for attempted murder. Another student went to prison for kidnapping and attempted murder. 8 of my students became teachers themselves. 3 more are in college training to be teachers. One student even named his baby after me. You must have had an impact. I was a very young home tutor. I was 19/20 and I would teach middle school going kids. Last year I went up to check up on some of my students. One boy, who was constantly getting low grades but was very smart, managed to get into one of the state cricket teams. The academically smart kid turned out to be a drug peddler and the last I heard was that he was always on the street doing Would have been 10x better if he was doing math instead. My aunt was a phys ed teacher for decades in our local school system. Must have had thousands of students go through her classes. When she was in her late 50s, still teaching, she went to a friend's bachelorette party. It was hosted at a house, with a bunch of middle-aged women have wine and chatting in excitement for the pending nuptials of the bride. As the night went on, the doorbell rings, and a pair of incredibly fit young men enter the residence. Some music starts playing, and the men start stripping. As these strippers are working around the room dancing with for the various ladies, my aunt has a sense of recognition of one of them but can't quite place it. As he's dancing with her, he shouts out Himes. Last name, nice to see you. I was in your pay class 2 years ago. My aunt and her friends start cracking up, laughing so hard, but she was also kind of embarrassed. Apparently the kid was keeping himself in great shape, so her fitness lessons must have been effective. She should have given him a thumbs up and said, A+, good job. One kid was convicted of murder. It was a fight between 2 drunk kids and one of them got knocked out and didn't wake up. It's a dang shame on all accounts. This student was a particularly nice kid. Most of mine are happy souls with a smile on their face and family and friends they love. They have jobs, are stay-at-home mums, etc. If I am lucky enough to see them and they remember me, we share funny anecdotes from when I taught them. I just enjoy being remembered and seeing them makes me so joyful, especially if they are happy with their lives. Success should be measured in happiness. Great answer. You sound like a real positive influence, keep it up. I taught intermediate school for a short while in the early 90s. I had a student who was really a great kid, courteous, smart, resourceful and funny. Just an all-around pleasure to be around. I recently met someone with the same last name as him, no relation, so it made me curious as to what my former student was up to. Did a Google search, and it turns out, he is a lobbyist for the sugar industry. Man, I wonder what went wrong in his life for it to turn out that way. JK, I'm happy for him. One of my kids is now a celebrity in the Philippines. On the more mundane end of the scale, one of them is now back and a colleague on the staff. I see one of my former students living in a box near the exit I take from highway to get home. Very sad. You know Taylor Swift? Well, I never taught her, but I did teach a student who went on to become a surgeon. I found out like you would expect. I went in to get some routine surgery done, and during the pre-surgery consultation I thought I recognized him as one of my former students, but didn't want to say anything because he didn't seem to recognize me. To be fair, I have lost a lot of weight and hair since he would have last seen me. I went home and looked him up and sure enough it was him. I thought at first it was funny that he of all people went on to become a surgeon, but in retrospect, it actually makes a lot of sense. He was always a good kid and sharp as a tack, but had so much energy and was very fidgety. He was also a fairly advanced cellist if I remember correctly. I always assumed he would go into a trade because he was clearly not suited to a 9-5 desk job, but that would probably be a waste of his potential. I asked him about it in the post-operation consultation and he said he was going to go into plumbing. But in year 12 he sat the UMAT, Australian aptitude test for entry into medicine just to see what he would get, and scored high enough to get an interview. From there he just went along with it, eventually ending up graduating and becoming a surgeon. TLDR, not every student in this thread went on to become a murderer. Depends on how many patients he has lost. Kidding. Glad both of you are doing well, and that you got some extra good news post-op. I called CPS on a few occasions for a child that I thought was being neglected, and as far as I know, CPS never looked into it. I received confirmation that they were still enrolled in school, so at the very least I know they're not dead. I found out he'd become a grandfather at 31. On a lighter note, a different girl, who lived in government housing and would sometimes come in without shoes, got a scholarship to the state college and then paid her way through graduate school at UC Berkeley. She has a great job, a private ski lodge in Vail, and her son may qualify for the 2020 Olympics in synchronized diving. My mum became a step-great-grandmother at 52. So not the question and not the reverse. Maybe a side slide. I wasn't popular in high school and hung with an odd crowd. Well, one guy was clearly smarter than anyone in my public school. Like Sheldon Smart in a room full of ants. Anyways, I'm looking into why I didn't get invited to my 10-year reunion and remembered my old classmate. Decide to look him up. He has 4 PhDs in various scientific fields, working on a 5th. He's written about a half-dozen books on physics and other topics way over my head, and just broke into the multimillionaire club. Was cool to see he was doing well. Looked up the ones who were at the top of the class. The surprising outcome was that the brightest ones did not do the best. One who was a Harvard grad with PhD in anthro ended up in the EMS Gov services and retired from there. Another was the brightest in the class and does videos and sound performances. Highly gifted in music, math and intellectually, but unknown, except locally. However, those in a gifted to low genius range outperformed their brightest schoolmates. 5 became MDs. 1 became one of the top lawyers in the nation. A second became the CFO of a major oil gas company, UCAS, whose personal net worth is likely in the $100 million range. He got a settlement in the world court for $50 billions from Russia for the UCAS shareholders and others, which is being enforced, with $5 billions recovered so far. Another became a college prof in Portland, and 4 became lawyers. Another became a well-known writer and director in TV, Grey's Anatomy, for instance. The last has created a working model of higher brain outputs, and realized a way to combine most all human knowledge into a single, unified model, aka the holy grail of the sciences, a TOE. It explains what's going on inside brain and outside, events in existence. Furthermore, the number of children per person was in the 0-2 range. 6 had no children. Only 3 out of the 25 had 3 or more kids. It's hard to say if this is generally found, but it's an indication. These are some of the people of a single class in a small central US town. One of my classmates moved away after freshman year, and when I looked her up senior year she had given birth to 4 kids. I guess she had one of them sophomore year and then had triplets junior year. I was at a Starbucks the other day and saw a guy who looked just like one of my students from a few years ago. So I went on Facebook with friends. He's in his 20s now, and went to see if it was actually him. It wasn't, but apparently I had missed something in his life that turned him into a crazy Christian fundamentalist, climate change denier, racist, bigoted hate-spewing butthole that he had become. He used to be a really nice, very intelligent, well-rounded kid, but now he's a completely different person. I'm still friends on Facebook with him. I want to keep an eye on him to see if he swings back. Not a teacher, but looked up my only classmate in 3rd and 4th grade and found out that he was arrested for stealing a car and doing some other wrongalingo things. It was really depressing, considering the kid was pretty smart when he wanted to be. Wrongalingo. As part of my job, I teach classes to operators at gas plants. One of the operators was shamelessly hitting on the sexy chemist the whole class. He later ended up in sexual harassment training, finally getting let go. Another one kept showing up to class drunk. He eventually got fired for coming to work drunk. One guy got put in jail for dealing M, then got his butt kicked by the Aryan nation for watching Family Guy one too many times. The guy who kept sleeping in class got his arm crushed by a drum being transported by a crane. Should have moved out of the way. Other way around. I found some of my old teachers, the ones who had the biggest impact. Growing up I had severe ADHD. Still do, but it tends to mature a bit as one grows older. So I wanted to find them to let them know I'm doing alright and to thank them. Still getting there, but they were very happy to see I'm working on my masters currently. There was once a kid in one of my classes, when I did a long-term sub-job, about 5 months long, who was extremely smart but not very motivated, and he had a bad temper. I told him a couple times that I could see him doing great things if he applied himself. Last year, I found out he killed himself less than a year after I had him as a student. Reverse here. At my old high school I found out that a math teacher, who I didn't have but my buddies did, was fired for sexual harassment of a good friend of mine's little sister. While in the topic, no ex football coach was fired while subbing for a class, unaware that his computer was projecting out to the class. He was an older gentleman. He proceeded to look up big titty cheerleaders. Many caught this magnificent moment of Snapchat and he has since been fired. Kinda sad I graduated before all this gold. Not me, but one of my teachers told us went to school with someone who the movie Pain and Gain is based off on. He was a trainer who tried to extort one of his clients and ended up killing him. He played football with him and said he was a bad kid. My 6th grade English teacher followed my group of students who graduated high school in 2011. Only 2% of the class graduated high school. A guy in my high school, he was 17 at the time, was sent to prison after he beat his sister's bully into a coma with a 2x4 from woodshop. The kid who was put in the coma age 14 was a veggie, up until his parents let him go the week after. That's a good veggie tale. One of my students, who I only taught for a short time in elementary school, turned out to be a pretty successful college football player and is now in the NFL. One of my former students is in jail for murder. One of my students, who I taught in elementary school, turned up in one of my college classes once I made the move from K5 to college, and it's studying to be a teacher. That was pretty cool, though it makes me feel old. I'm really bad with names, so I don't remember them past a year or so, especially full names. However, one of my students changed his first name to Dragon. That was amusing. Awesome to the maximum. Not a teacher, but one of my classmates and his mom murdered a lady with a screwdriver, stabbed her over 100 times, then stole her car. This wasn't my discovery but my mother's, who used to be a teacher. She turned on the TV and saw one of her former students, Lennox Lewis. I shouldn't, but here goes. At last count I have had 6 former students that have committed murder. It was a rough school. It'd been 6 years since I was teaching there. Where to start? Attempted 2nd-degree murder, one who got murdered, armed robbery, suicide, rape, molestation, statutory rape, array of others who have had small charges. All of these were different students. Taught behavior disorder for some time. One of my favorites, unbeknownst to me and many, killed herself a few years after graduating. I guess she was bipolar or had dissociative identity disorder. Either way, star student, had future in so many fields, but had a problem that only few knew about. I am tempted to think, did I miss something? Was X a cry for help? But there was just no inkling of any of it in high school. The world was her oyster. I worked elsewhere when it happened. I didn't find out till a year later. Want to call family and offer condolences, but they are probably just now able to move on. One of my math teachers in high school told the class story about something funny one of her former students did. She said that she wondered how he was doing and one of my classmates suggested she could try to find him on Facebook. She was older and didn't think to use social media to contact him. She says that's a great idea, and because we didn't have a ton of stuff to do in class that day, she decides to Google his name using the computer at her desk. The first thing that shows up is HQ hardcore screenshots of her former student gaping his butthole and shoving vegetables up there. I know this because her computer was hooked up to a smart board in front of the class and literally everyone could see it. My former 7th grade student has a master's in nursing, traveled through Central America, and just had a baby. My former 1st grade student killed someone in a park in my neighborhood a couple of years ago. This kid I taught, Kevin, boy, I could tell you some crazy stories. Stuff you wouldn't believe in a million years. Anyway, seems he changed his name to Donald and is running for president. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.